Oh, thank you, Ajahn, for still being here. Because since our Bodhiana chairman is here today, so I would like to introduce him to you all. He's Gerald. And Carol is here. She's the one who helped us get this venue, so very important person. And Elsa is our treasurer. She'll take care of all the accounting matters for us. And Freddie, as you know, doing the recording. And Jean is helping out with all sort of things. So thank you. And I'm Della. Thank you very much for joining us. And some announcement and, well, not really promotion or no, some advertisement. Ajahn Brahm is coming here February 21st to 24th, 4-day retreat in February in 2025, next year. Yes, yes, yes. And there are going to be a day of mindfulness and talk around those times. But mark it down if you want to attend the retreat. It's 21st to 24th. So it's basically fixed. Thank you very much. Please enjoy Ajahn Brahmali first. Thank you.
Okay, everyone, welcome, Gerald and Carol. Nice to have you both here. Good. So I have known some of these senior members of BIF for long. How long have I known you for, Gerald? A long time. You and Della and everyone. 2013. Okay. Wow. Okay, so that's 11 years or something now already. Okay, amazing. So I was just walking down with Daniel. I don't know if you know each other, everyone here, but anyway, it doesn't matter. And it's very peaceful here. It's a beautiful place, actually. It's really amazing that a city like Hong Kong can have such a beautiful, peaceful place, and very little, it's, I don't know, it's more peaceful here than Bodhiana Monastery sometimes. It's kind of extraordinary. So this is really extraordinary, there's not much noise from the roads or anything like that. That's remarkable. So very, very fortunate to have a place like this. And when I travel to Singapore or KL or some of the other cities, nothing quite like this. This is really quite unusual. So, and another reason to have some gratitude and feel that we are on the right. Things are going well. Things are going the right way. Anyway, we're going to come back to the Mahanama Sutta that we started out this morning. And this beautiful sutta about how to think or how to meditate if you are a noble one. This is about someone who has, what does it say, reached the fruit and understood the instructions. So strictly speaking, this is about somebody who is a noble person, someone who's a stream enterer, but the reality is that we are all trying to be like little stream enterers, right? This is the idea. We're trying to elevate our mind to reach to that point. And so never think of yourself as fundamentally different. You're not. You are basically have the same possibilities, the same potential is always there. And so if the stream mentors can do it, it means we can approach the Dhamma in the same way and move kind of our minds in that same direction. That is really what this is about. And there are other suttas. This particular sutta is about the stream mentors, but there are other places where the Buddha gives similar instructions to people who are not stream mentors as well. There's one later on in the Anguttara Nikaya 11th, I think, where he teaches something similar to a layperson called what's his name now? This is terrible. My memory is failing me now. So anyway, this is not a layperson, and he's not a stream mentor, and he gives a similar kind of instruction. One difference is that this particular sutta is about recollecting the Sangha. That particular sutta is about recollecting your Kalyana Mitta, which is a little bit different. Kalyana Mitta is a more broad, more general idea of friendship, whereas this sutta is about the Sangha. The Sangha is the Arya Sangha, the noble people. So a little bit different in that sense. And so what this is about like the joy side of the Buddhist path. We've been looking at the reality side of things so far, the right view of the reality of the world, and that sometimes can be quite depressing. And sometimes all you have to do to know about the reality of the world is to look at the news on TV, see what's happening in the world. There's wars here, there's wars there, there's unstable politics everywhere. There is climate change, there is all kind of things happening in the world. And sometimes that's enough to make you depressed. But actually, you shouldn't, because really what all of that news you see on the TV, what it is basically just the Buddha telling you via the TV that things are impermanent, things are unreliable, things are uncertain, things are out of control. There's no essence in the world. Everything is empty. Yeah, empty, empty, empty. There's nothing that holds it together. It's just cause and conditions working on each other. Everything always kind of moving around like air, like the wind in the trees. The world is like that. And because there is no stability, we should never really expect any stability in that world. There's nothing really to hold it stable. The only thing that might hold it stable is a self. And of course that is the basic teaching of the Buddha, the most fundamental part of it, that there is no essence to life. There is no essence to the world. And so we can expect this fluidity. So when you read about these news and you want to despair because the world is going bad, don't despair. Remember the Buddha said, this is what the Buddha said. This is a chance for you to get insight into the Buddha's teachings. It's an opportunity to understand the way of the world, and it turns your mind in a different direction again onto the spiritual path. And especially it turns your mind onto these kind of things we're going to look at now, because this is where the solution is found, in the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. All of these things are solved by the practice of the Noble Eightfold Path. And this is kind of the idea here. And so this is why this is so useful. So we have the downside, the reality of the world, and the upside is the solution. So now we're going to move towards that solution. So the first part, I'm going to read this. This is kind of very nice Dhamma we're going to hear now. So can you hear? Because this is nice, yeah? I'm asking this lady in front because she says she has bad hearing, so I'm afraid that she can't. So I'm going to say this is very nice. You understand? Yeah? This is very good. So I'm going to go slowly so you can understand every word. Very, very slowly. Yeah. It's very hard for me to speak slowly. You have no idea how difficult it is for me. I am kind of... So let's try. Let's see what this is like, yeah? Because this is kind of very uplifting, and it shows you how the Dhamma ideally works when it works in the right way. And so the Buddha says to Mahanama, he says, Mahanama, when a noble disciple has reached the fruit and understood the instruction, they frequently practice this kind of meditation. Yeah? Firstly, a noble disciple recollects the Buddha, the realized one. That Buddha, that blessed one, is perfected. A fully awakened Buddha, accomplished in knowledge and conduct, holy knower of the world, supreme guide for those who wish to train, teachers of gods and humans, awakened, blessed. When a noble disciple recollects the Buddha, the mind is not full of greed, hate, and delusion. At that time, the mind is unswerving, or straight, if you like, based on the Buddha. A noble disciple whose mind is unswerving or straight finds inspiration in the meaning and the teaching, finds joy connected with the teaching. When they are joyful, rapture springs up. When the mind is full of rapture, the body becomes tranquil. When the body is tranquil, they feel bliss. And when they are blissful, the mind becomes stilled in samadhi. This is called the noble disciple who lives in balance amid people who are unbalanced, who lives untroubled among people who are untroubled. They've entered the stream of the teaching and developed the recollection of the Buddha. So here is this beautiful sequence of terms, starting with joy, then rapture, then tranquility, then bliss, and then samadhi. Samadhi is the stillness of the mind, the peace of the mind that comes in deep meditation. This is there. This is available for everyone. And this is kind of the promise of the Buddhist path. when it is lived in the right way. And this kind of teaching that you see right here is found throughout the suttas. Yeah, this is a very, very common thing. The things that are really common in the suttas, that is like the core teaching of the Buddha, because you find it again and again here. And if you were to read this, if you were to take the agamas in Chinese, ancient Chinese translation, yeah, it's called Middle Chinese or something like that, the kind of Chinese characters, the way they read 1,500 years ago, and you take the similar passage and you translate it into English, you would almost not be able to tell the difference because the words are almost exactly the same. Yeah, one is handed down via a completely different school of Buddhism, Sarvastivadin school, traveled on the Silk Road all the way into China, they ended up in Xi'an or Luoyang or something like that. And then they were translated into Chinese characters by some of these ancient monks. And then they have been kept in China ever since. And the other suttas, they traveled from India to Sri Lanka with Mahinda and Sanghamitta, the son and the daughter of Ashoka. And then in Sri Lanka, they were kept in Sri Lanka in the Pali language. And then when you translate the Pali into English and you translate the Chinese into English, you can almost not tell the difference. Isn't that kind of extraordinary? This is like over 2,000 years that they have been separated since the time of Ashoka. And it's almost not to be distinguished. And these kind of teachings, especially, these core kind of teachings that you see here, these beautiful teachings about happiness and tranquility, which is the essence of what the Dhamma is about in terms of what it can give us on this path, that is basically verbatim the same. And so it's kind of really extraordinary. And when you may wonder, I'm just showing you one sutta, and you may not know whether this sutta is common or not. But this kind of structure that you see here is found in many, many places. For example, the 7 factors of awakening, one of the core teaching frameworks of the Buddha on how to reach awakening, has basically the same ideas to it. Anapanasati Sutta on mindfulness of breathing has a similar kind of factors. Dependent liberation sequence, a very common sequence in the suttas, is similar. And all of these teachings occur many, many, many times individually in the suttas. So this is like really core, really some of the essence of what the Buddha is talking about. This is like the psychology of meditation. When your meditation works correctly, this is what is supposed to happen. It's just everything is there. And then it goes even further. After samadhi, it goes to insight, and from insight it goes to viraga. First of all, nibbida, which is like a rejection of the world, if you like. Viraga, losing interest in the world, and eventually liberation itself. That is what you find here. Everything you could ever want in life. Much more. You didn't even know you wanted these things, And then one day you get, wow, I'm glad I got this. I didn't know I wanted it, but now I know. Okay, wonderful. Is that kind of weird? These are so powerful and so deep that we don't even know that they exist. And then when we get there, we are kind of really happy, glad that they actually do exist because they are so remarkable. You get much more than your money's worth. You want to get your money's worth. This is way beyond your money's worth. This is kind of, this is like kind of unfathomable, some part of these aspects of this path. And so this is what I would recommend you to focus on when you read the suttas. Focus on those things that show you the uplift, that show you the beauty of these teachings, all the beautiful qualities of the mind, the peace, all of these things that are there. Because this is how we experience the path. And if we talk too much about the dukkha, we don't really understand what we're talking about. Because the dukkha side is very profound very often, very difficult to really fathom. But the happiness side, well, this is how we experience the path, these kinds of happinesses. So this is actually more important in terms of understanding the Dhamma than thinking too much about dukkha, dukkha, dukkha. Too much dukkha, and we get turned away from the Dhamma, and then that's a serious problem. So, and you can see here that what is going on here is that you are reflecting on the Buddha, to achieve this kind of happiness. It is thinking about the Buddha in the right way. Understanding who the Buddha is, understanding that you are in the presence of the greatest spiritual genius in human history. There is no one like the Buddha. The Buddha is like head and shoulders above everyone else. No one else really teaches non-self, anatta, emptiness. I say emptiness because we have because I'm in Hong Kong, so people are kind of maybe used to emptiness. Is that true? I kind of change my vocabulary a little bit depending on where I am. So Hong Kong, emptiness. Don't know. Maybe I'm just being silly, but that's kind of what it seems to me. Anyway, usually people who have little bit more Mahayana leaning, they tend to kind of have more emptiness as part of their Buddhist training. And it's also there in the suttas as well, so it's not really different. And the only person in the world who really teaches that emptiness fully, who is capable of doing that, is the Buddha. You have to reach that full awakening to be able to do that. This is almost, this is really unique in the history of the world. Sometimes you may think that kind of modern people who do psychology or teach psychology or philosophy, very often they will say that there is no self. They will say things like, oh, the mind is just all this cause and conditions, and when you look inside of the mind, you cannot see a me, you cannot see an I here. There's no stability there. And so you might think, well, that means that modern psychology agrees with the Buddha, but not really. Because one thing is to look into the mind and see superficially that there is no self. But another thing is to realize this to the very core. It's a completely different thing. If you just look at it superficially, okay, you may see there is no self there, but you haven't really understood it. And so it doesn't change your attitude. It still feels like you have a self, because you haven't really seen it fully. Whereas if you practice the Buddhist teachings and you see it fully, it changes you psychologically on a fundamental level, and you can never really believe in this idea again. So those ordinary psychologists, they may say that there is no self, they believe in a self anyway. That's kind of the weird thing, right? They haven't really overturned their mind with that insight, if you like. And so what we want to do, we want to be able to reflect on the Buddha in such a way that it gives rise to this joy and this peace that we're talking about here. And the reason why the reflection of the Buddha comes first, afterwards comes the reflection of the Dhamma, then the Sangha, then the Sila, is because it is the most powerful one. And so if you're able to get your mind around who the Buddha was, it's the most powerful way of giving rise to these good qualities. This is why it is so useful. So we need to understand the Buddha. And so it's kind of, this understanding that you are in the presence of the greatest treasure that is possible to achieve or possible to find in the human realm. There is nothing like this. That you are in the presence of something that can give you everything you ever wanted. You should be overjoyed, to have the Buddha as your teacher, because this is that thing that gives you everything. Sometimes we get joyful by all these silly little things in life. Something nice happens, someone gives us a nice little gift. Yay, wow, that is so sweet. Thank you so much for a box of chocolate or a flower or whatever. And we get very happy with that. But then the Buddha's sutta comes out, whatever, boring. You know what I mean? It's a bit like that, Even though the Buddha's sutta is much more interesting than the, those flowers or those chocolates. So we don't really understand, and this is why we need to turn our mind in that direction to kind of, get an understanding of this. And to me, the first place to start with understanding the Buddha is first of all to understand him as a human being. And this is really important because when the more you understand who the Buddha is, the more you will take him as your teacher. If you understand that the Buddha is like any other person in the world, someone you can approach, someone you can talk to, someone you can ask questions from. One nice way of reading the sutras is to read them with questions in mind. Okay, what am I trying to find out? It's almost like you are interrogating or interviewing the Buddha while you're reading the sutras, trying to find answer to the questions of life, what life really is about. So the first thing to do is to understand the Buddha as a human being. First of all, to see him as someone you can approach, and then afterwards understand why he is special. And to see him as an ordinary human, it's actually nice to read those little things in the sutras that we often don't focus on. The little narratives, the little stories about the Buddha, what he was like, how he interacted with the people around him. And so one of the things that you find in the suttas, for example, you see the Buddha going for pindabat, going for alms round. There's many places the Buddha takes his bowl and robe, and then he goes into the village for alms. Most people these days, if they thought the Buddha was coming for alms round, they would freak out. The Buddha, what do you mean the Buddha? The Buddha's waiting downstairs waiting for alms. Hurry up. It's the Buddha. Okay, better hurry up then. But usually people get really frightened if it is the Buddha. It just sounds like too much. Surely it can't be serious, the Buddha's coming for alms round. But in those days, that was common. And so they would probably treat the Buddha just like any other monk. They put a bit of food in his bowl, and the Buddha would carry on walking. So there was a very natural interaction with the Buddha. One of those extraordinary little things that you see in the suttas, the Buddha will come to a monastery, and then the monks would put out a little stool for the Buddha, put out some water, so that the Buddha can wash his feet. The Buddha washed his own feet. These days, if you're a monk, sometimes other people wash your feet for you. The Buddha didn't even have other people washing his feet. I always feel a bit embarrassed when I remember that. The Buddha didn't, if someone wants to wash sometimes it happens, people want to wash my feet. But I said, the Buddha washed his own feet. Is this right? And it feels kind of weird, because it's like almost as if you are taking yourself to, wait, something isn't quite right when that happens. One of the suttas which I look at later on is really powerful in giving you an idea how they interacted with the Buddha. This is the Upakilesa Sutta we'll look about later on here. And in the Upakilesa Sutta, the monks are arguing with each other. Something very important has happened in the monastery. And because of that very important thing, they're arguing. So very important. Someone left a bit of water in a container, and they left that water in a container, and now they're arguing whether that was a breaching of the vinaya, of the conduct or not. Really important matters, right? It's like always like that. The things we argue the most about are the most insignificant and silly things. And there was just like that at the time of the Buddha. So the monks are arguing about this really stupid thing. And then it gets very bad. I think this is like what the commentary says anyway, that it was about a small thing like that. It gets very bad. And you get two sides in the monastery arguing about whether there's an offense or not. And then one monk goes to the Buddha and he says, "Oh, Venerable Sir, please, out of compassion, come." That idea, out of compassion again, as I mentioned yesterday. Come out of compassion. And obviously he wants the Buddha to try to resolve the dispute. And we would think, if the Buddha says, do this, don't, actually, the Buddha is not very self-important. Do this, don't do that, this is the right approach. We would think that they would follow that. What would you do if the Buddha said to you, okay, this is a better way, don't do that, do this? Would you say, yes, sir, or would you say, what? I'm refusing to do that. Or what would you do? And most people think that if the Buddha said, wow, I would follow straight away. That's what we think. But when you are around a person, it's different. And so the Buddha goes to those monks and he says to the monks, enough monks of this arguing and disputing. Can't remember the exact words. We'll come to this later on. And then when the Buddha has said that, then this one monk, he goes up to the Buddha and he says to the Buddha, he said, "Oh, Venerable Sir, you just live at ease and relax. We will sort this out." And it's kind of extraordinary. Basically, he's dismissing the Buddha. Then the Buddha says a second time, "Please don't argue and dispute." He says the same thing again. "We will be known for this." He says the third time. And at the third time, what does the Buddha do? He leaves. Because he can't solve it. Isn't that interesting? We think the Buddha is some kind of superhuman who can solve and organize everything. He can't even get people to stop arguing here. This is the reality of humanity, right? And I know this. If we are with Ajahn Brahm, sometimes the monk refuses to listen to Ajahn Brahm. I'm one of those monks who sometimes refuses to listen to Ajahn Brahm. I'm very stubborn. I'm very kind of, and it's good to be a little bit stubborn, not too stubborn. A little bit is okay, but not too much. And that tells you something about the Buddha. He's more like an ordinary human being. How we are used to interacting with each other. He doesn't have this kind of ability to override people's ordinary stupidity and defilements. people are always stupid in this way. And so then the Buddha leaves. But the Buddha is, of course, he understands what he has to do. Then he leaves and he goes off to in a forest somewhere. And of course, as soon as the Buddha leaves, and then the monks, after a while, they start to think, wait a minute, the Buddha is no longer here. This is not so good. And then gradually they come to their senses. Sometimes that is a good kind of psychological trick, to leave and then to kind of get them to think about it, and then they come to the senses eventually. So this is how the Buddha interacted with monks. And as I also like to mention very often, sometimes you see the Buddha interacting with monks in very nice ways. One of the habits of the Buddha is to walk around the monastery, go to the various monks, go to the various kutis. The kutis are the little huts the monks have. He goes and he looks at what the monks are doing. And he sees one monk was patching his robe. I have a patch on my robe, by the way. Shall I show you my patch on my robe? I have a patch on this robe as well. It's nice to have a patch on your robe. And because it's not about looking posh. That's not the idea of Buddhism. It's just about basically using what you have. And so the Buddha sees this monk patching up, and he says, "Oh, well done, monk, patching your robe. This is the right way of living." He comes to another monk's hut. One of my favorite stories with the Buddha. And this monk has dysentery here. Dysentery is a very filthy illness. Everything is kind of coming out of your body. And so the Buddha and Ananda clean up this monk. It's kind of this is very dirty work. And they clean him up, and then they kind of put on some new robes, and they lift him up and put him in bed. This is the Buddha doing this. And so you get this feeling of a real human being, who is not just aloof, is not just a teacher, but is someone who is involved in the world, who is not just compassionate from a distance, but who has real compassion and acts on that compassion towards the people around him. It's very beautiful. It's really kind of the Buddha is down to earth. The Buddha is not some sort of highfalutin thing which is kind of far away or anything like that. The Buddha is very real as a person. And so these are some of the things that you read in the suttas, and people go to the Buddha and they argue with him and they discuss with him, and all of these kind of things. All of these things are kind of found in the suttas. They're all there. So this is the one side of the Buddha. And so then, when you hear about the Buddha in this way, you can start to take the Buddha as your real teacher. He's not that far away. He's a human being, just like us. I discussed all of the other things before about the Buddha, having, before his awakening, having all the ordinary experiences of human beings. We saw this morning how he had attachments to his family and all of these kind of things, just like everyone else. So that is the ordinary kind of side of the Buddha. But then there is also the higher side of the Buddha, the kind of the extraordinary side of the Buddha. And one of the things that is interesting about the higher side of the Buddha, I just read out before this paragraph on the qualities of the Buddha. This is the very famous Itipiso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho verse. This is how the Buddha says we should remember the Buddha. And you will notice when we read that, there is nothing there about anything supernatural or magical, anything like that. That is not what is important with the Buddha. That is what people are interested in, right? People want to hear about supernormal phenomena and psychic powers, and they want to hear about how the Buddha fought a battle with the Naga and these kind of things. That's what they want to hear about. And I can see why it's kind of exciting, but that is not what makes the Buddha interesting. What makes the Buddha special is his wisdom and his ability to act as a teacher. Those are the things that are important for the Buddha, because all of these psychic powers, they're just like a bit of entertainment. It's true, it's entertainment. Oh, that's pretty cool. Okay. Walking on water. Okay. I knew we were better than the Christians. The Buddha can also walk on water. So we or flying through the air. I don't know what. All of these things are kind of there. But what is interesting about the Buddha is the wisdom, because it is the wisdom that solves problems. It is the wisdom that leads to harmony. It is the wisdom that leads to happiness and away from suffering. It is the wisdom that teaches you how to live in the right way in the world. It's the wisdom that leads to spiritual growth for for all his disciples. So that is what matters. That is what the Buddha really is about. His understanding of the world, his insight into the nature of things. And so how can we think about the Buddha to really make the Buddha your teacher? You want to be, when you read the suttas, one of the ways that I was spoken with my friend Bhante Sujato on how to read, how to translate the suttas. And one of the ways we decided you should translate the word of the Buddha is so you have the feeling that you are in the presence of the Buddha when you read the suttas. It's as if the Buddha is speaking to you. That is the ideal. So the language should not be too formal. Yeah, if it's too formal, it doesn't feel natural. It's not as if you're talking to somebody. It should be quite conversational. But it should also have a dignity because it's coming from the Buddha. So it's a kind of difficult balance to get, right? But it should be as if you are in the presence of someone very inspiring and interesting, and you should read it in that way. And it was interesting because I have been involved with quite a bit of translation of the Vinaya Pitaka, and sometimes I meet translators. I go to Thailand usually every year, and we have this workshop, translation workshop, in one of the big monasteries in Thailand. And when I go there, there's a kind of large group of scholars coming together. I'm pretty much the only monk who translates. Everyone else is kind of professors and PhDs and these kind of things, whereas I'm nobody. I'm just wearing brown robes. That's kind of which is nice. Yeah, it's nice to kind of not be anyone's particular. And then we discussed the idea of translation. And so I was the one who had translated the most. So I presented a little bit of my translation to everyone else who was present. And it was very interesting to see people's reactions, because my translation is very kind of down to earth. Yeah, it's like, for example, when a monk wants to go forth and he goes to his parents and he says, "Oh, please, can I go forth?" I write, "Oh, mom and dad, yeah, I'd like to go forth." That's what I say in there, because it sounds real. Yeah, that's what people will say. They won't say, "Oh, mother and father, please, may I?" No one talks like that. Yeah, they say mom and dad or whatever. And so it has to be ordinary language. It feels real. And sometimes I use words like "gosh," yeah, when I write, because there is some kind of expression in this Vinaya. And so I presented this kind of, especially these places where I translated a bit on the unorthodox kind of way. Yeah. When the Buddha speaks, I don't translate like that. When the Buddha speaks, I use a dignified language. But when it's ordinary people talking, I use this kind of language sometimes. And it was very interesting because these scholars were not used to this. For them, the purpose of translation is to elevate the language, to make it really formal, full of Sanskrit words that nobody understands, convoluted sentence structures, yeah, and the Buddha is like the Lord Supreme, Abbot, the Master of the Universe, kind of these really long epithets. And that's not how the world works. It doesn't work like that. And so when they heard me saying these things, they kind of started complaining about my translation. Because there was like the monk in charge. He's one of the top monks in all of Thailand. He was in charge. He was sitting there and he was listening to everyone, right? And he was okay with my translation. I think he didn't really say very much. He was just sitting there listening. But I got the impression he was okay. But some of the other people were complaining about my translation. And I was really happy with that. Because if no one complains about what you do, you haven't done anything useful. If everyone agrees with what you're doing, you might as well not do anything at all, right? Because everyone agrees already. And so I was really happy with that. I felt kind of very secure that I was doing the right thing anyway. I didn't really have any doubts about it. And sometimes people, they object, not because they necessarily fundamentally disagree, but they are used to something else, yeah? And we tend to go with what we are used with. We are creatures of habits. And when someone says that there's something different, it's like, what? That's not right, yeah? Because you're used to something else. And so it was fascinating. Yeah, as a monk, you might think I would be the one who venerates the Buddha the most, yeah? And these lay people wouldn't, maybe not, but actually it was the other way around. I was more down to earth. And so this is kind of the idea of the word of the Buddha. Yeah, we should feel that we are in the presence of the Master when we read the suttas. And when we feel that, then the transmission happens. Sometimes when you read, it's almost like the text gets in the way. The text is so formal, the text is so hard to understand, yeah. People need lots of Pali words in there, yeah, because these words cannot be translated, so we have to just leave the Pali. Yeah, this is kind of one of the ideas. I say no Pali words, so everyone can read it. Yeah, it can always be made understandable if you put your effort into it. And so this is the way. So how can we make this become even more real? And one of the things that I always say to people when I talk about these kind of contemplations is to remember that when the Buddha gave these teachings 2,500 years ago, he was not just teaching the crowd in front of him. Yeah, the Buddha, when he taught, he knew that he was setting in motion the wheel of the Dhamma. And setting in motion the wheel of the Dhamma means that these teachings, they carry on. They carry on from one culture to another one. They carry on from one era to another era, from one time to another time. And they move on into the world. They spread out over large areas. And these days, it's found everywhere in the world. I don't know about Antarctica, but pretty much everywhere else you find these teachings. And so they're everywhere. And the Buddha knew that when he started out. And so one of the things about these teachings, because the Buddha knew that, he made them universal. Yeah, these are universal teachings that are applicable to everyone. They're not specific to time and place or to any kind of culture or anything like that. These are universal teachings that is applicable to everyone, everywhere. They are about fundamental aspects of what it means to be a human being. That is the same for all humans. Yeah, everyone has a mind, everyone has some defilements, everyone wants to be happy, no one wants to suffer, and that's basically what they are about. They are about the fundamental desires and wishes of human beings. And that is what you read, and when you read them, you can relate to it, because you know that this is exactly what human beings are like. We are all the same. It's kind of boring, but we're all the same. Yeah, you think you travel around the world, you see a different culture, but actually it's that kind of veneer, a small difference on the superficial surface. You go a little bit behind the scenes, and basically we are all the same. I'm sorry to say that, but that's the reality here. The world is really boring. It's just dukkha all the way through. That's kind of the reality. So when the Buddha gave these teachings 2,500 years ago, he was not just teaching the crowd in front of him. He was teaching all those future generations, all those people around the world, the people in Hong Kong, the people in Perth, in Australia. Yeah? When we are reading these teachings now, this is the Buddha speaking to us over the gap of 2,500 years, over the cultural gap from India to Hong Kong, or from India to Perth. Yeah? This is the Buddha talking to us. And so the Buddha, when he gave these teachings, he thought of us. Yeah, he thought of us. He actually, not kind of individually, but he thought about all of these people who are going to reach these teachings in the future. And so when you remember that the Buddha was thinking of you, of me, of each one of us, it means that these teachings come alive in a way they otherwise do not. Actually, wait a minute, the Buddha is talking to me here. I better listen. What is he saying, right? What is he saying to me here? You take it much more personally when you do that. We are all the same, and because we are all the same, all of these teachings are applicable to every one of us. Yeah? So he's talking to you. Wow, okay, he's talking to me. Let me listen. And you start to shake, you tremble a little bit because the Buddha is talking to you. Oh, the Buddha is talking. Whoa, scary. Yeah, this is kind of how to get your mind into this. And then it becomes personal, then it becomes important. Then you really try to understand what is talking, what the Buddha is saying here. And so that is one part of it, yeah, understanding that you are a disciple of the Buddha in this very, in a sense, in a very direct way here. It's a very beautiful thing to think about it like that. But the other thing about the Buddha that makes these words so powerful is that when the Buddha teaches, he doesn't have any ulterior motives for teaching. He doesn't have any vested interest. He teaches only for one reason, to help us. That is the only reason, only because of compassion. I mentioned this yesterday. The Buddha doesn't have any benefit of teaching. He doesn't want any disciples. He wants less disciples. He wants people to go away. Yeah, that's what he really wants. There is a nice place, I think, in the Mahasunyata Sutta, I think, Majjhima Nikaya 122, I think it is there, where it says that after the Buddha comes out of a deep state of meditation, when he talks to people afterwards, he talks in a way so as to dismiss them, to get rid of them as soon as possible, because he's so peaceful, doesn't really want to have anything to do with people after that. And so for the Buddha, people are a nuisance. He still teaches. Why? Because out of compassion, because he knows he has the solution to the problems in the world. There are very few people like that who teach only out of compassion. Most teachers in the world, they have a vested interest. They do it because maybe they need some funds for their monastery. Yeah, or they do it because, oh, it's nice to have some disciples who listen to me teaching. Yeah, or it's kind of handy to have that. Or I need a meal. Yeah, so I better give them a teaching so people can give me some food back. Or whatever the reason is, there's always some reason, usually some reason why people teach. And so the Buddha teaches only out of compassion. And what that means is that when the Buddha gives these teachings, he doesn't give them to please us. He doesn't give them to anything at all. He gives them simply so that we can also reap the benefits of these teachings. We can also move towards awakening. So every word is said for your benefit. Every word is very carefully thought out. Svakato Bhagavata Dhammo. It means it's very carefully thought out. You see places in the sutras where the Buddha goes on retreat for a fortnight or whatever it is. Well, what does he do on retreat? I think one of the things he does is maybe to reflect on these teachings, how to express them in the best possible way. So this is, everything is done out of compassion. And the Buddha is your teacher. So when you read the sutta, see the compassion in the words. See the wisdom in the words. This is the Buddha talking to you. Every word matters. Every word means something. Yeah. Yes, we do a bit of study. Sometimes maybe not all the words are original, but generally speaking, every word matters. And then you read these teachings with a reverence, with a respect that they actually deserve, because this is how the Buddha taught these things. So this is how you think about these texts. Yeah, and it's very rare that we think about these texts in the right kind of way. And for that reason, we don't get the maximum out of them when we read them. So this is what it means when we talk about the Buddha being the greatest teacher in the world. When we talk about the Buddha being God, teacher of gods and humans, this is the sort of thing that we have in mind when we talk about these things. One of the nice things that you can do that I would also recommend you, sometimes I teach these things on retreat, is to imagine yourself visiting the Buddha. Yeah, this is another way of doing like Buddha Nusati. Imagine visiting the Buddha. Imagine what it would be like to do that. And you can imagine, right, maybe he is in the forest here, in the Kaduri, these mountains over here, I don't know. Yeah, imagine the Buddha is over here. Yeah, it's a nice place to be. You could very well be here. Climate is about right. So the Buddha says, imagine you go into the forest. You have heard, someone has told you, the Buddha is here. The Buddha is here. Wow, the Buddha is here. This is really amazing. Yeah, this is extraordinary. The Buddha is here. Okay, I better go and check it out and see. Maybe I can ask him some question. I have some problems in my life. I'll go and ask the Buddha, get some real answers. Instead of these kind of dodgy monks that come to Hong Kong, let's go straight to the master instead. So you go into the forest and you move in the direction. You heard the Buddha is sitting under the tree somewhere. You don't really know exactly where he is, so you walk a bit random. And suddenly you see someone in the distance. And what you see is you see someone who looks like a monk. Yeah, they got a shaven head, they're wearing robes. They look like a monk, basically. And you kind of start to feel a bit fearful. Yeah, this is the Buddha. The Buddha has a great reputation. You start to tremble a little bit, being a bit uncertain. Oh, this is the Buddha. Maybe he can read my mind. Yeah, maybe he can, I don't know what he can do. Yeah, oh, scary, scary. And so it's a bit frightening to meet the Buddha. But then as you go closer and closer to the Buddha, you start to feel this sense of peace, an aura of peace. There's something about great spiritual masters that they have an aura of peace about them. If you go, one of the things that I do when I get a bit agitated or restless, I just go up and see Ajahn Brahm. Ajahn Brahm comes out for tea time, and he kind of sits there and he just drinks his tea. He doesn't usually say very much. Ajahn Brahm is not, he's only talkative when he gives talks. Otherwise he doesn't say anything at all. The monks may chat a little bit around it, but Ajahn Brahm doesn't say anything. He just sits there. And so I go up and I sit down next to Ajahn Brahm, and he may say hello or something, and I say hello back, and then I sit down, make myself a cup of tea, and I just chill in Ajahn Brahm's presence. And then after a few minutes I feel better, and I go off again. That's kind of the meeting with Ajahn Brahm that we have. Sometimes it's more practical things, you have to discuss things, but sometimes it's like that. And now, if you are meeting the Buddha in the forest, it's a bit like that. It's like you're entering the space of someone who has this very powerful qualities, almost like it emanates from the person, You can feel that many times. You can feel that certain places have good energy, certain people have good energy, other people not so good energy, and etc., etc. And so then you start to become more relaxed, You're feeling of benevolence, a feeling of peace. And eventually when you come all the way up to the Buddha, you feel really quite at ease. But you don't really know what to do. You don't meet Buddhas very often, so you don't really sure what to do when you meet the Buddha. You kind of stand there a bit uncertain. And the Buddha looks at you and he says, sit down. And so you sit down, And then the Buddha, what does the Buddha do then? The Buddha says, well, how are you? Have you come from far away? This is the usual question the Buddha will ask. And you say, oh, I just come from the Kaduri center. Okay, not so far. Have you had something to eat? Have you had a nice lunch? You had a nice lunch, everyone? Yeah? Okay, good. So you can tell the Buddha you had a nice lunch, So you are here. And then the Buddha will say, well, why have you come? And by now you're feeling really at ease and really relaxed because you have this very benevolent feeling about this person. And then you start to feel a bit stupid because you thought before they're going to ask this kind of silly question about the problems in your life, right? Now you feel a bit kind of awkward about that because you feel that maybe it is not worthy of the occasion to ask such a simple question. But anyway, you don't have anything else to ask, so you ask anyway, I have problems with my wife or my husband, right? Please, what should I do? Most people have this kind of ordinary problems. And then the Buddha, he doesn't reject you. The Buddha understands human beings. He has probably himself sometimes had problems in life similar to that. And so he gives you some very basic advice. He tells you, remember people are suffering. Remember that people need compassion and understanding. Just listen and be kind. Understand that people are trapped in their problems. They can't really get out of them. And then you listen to some very, very simple words. And what is so surprising about the Buddha is how simple it is. Very simple teachings. Be kind, be compassionate, be understanding. People are suffering. And if they do the wrong thing, it's not because they want to hurt you. It's because they are suffering in their life. This is how people act when they suffer. And then you understand. And the most important thing in that conversation is not the words, but where they're coming from. They're coming from wisdom. They're coming from peace. They're coming from kindness. And you feel that in those words, all those beautiful qualities. And then when you have heard all of that, you just want to bow down. You really want to bow down because you understand this is worthy of bowing down to. There's something very beautiful going on here. You just can't stop yourself anymore. And so you bow down to the Buddha. That is how we should bow down when we bow down to the Buddha here every day, with that feeling of those qualities being there. And when you bow down to those beautiful qualities in the Buddha, you are developing those qualities within yourself. Because by respecting those beautiful qualities, you are developing them inside of yourself. So every time you bow down to the Buddha, remember that. It's an opportunity to recall who the Buddha is, what the Buddha is about. And by respecting that, by honoring that, you are developing those things inside of yourself. So don't bow too fast. Bow just naturally. remembering what is going on when you do that. So you bow down to the Buddha. And one of the reasons why bowing to the Buddha is so beautiful, because there is no ego there. Bowing to an ego is kind of painful, but bowing to beautiful qualities is nice. And so you bow down, and then you get up, and you say maybe thank you or whatever. And as you walk away from the Buddha, you know that this has left an impression on you. You know you will never forget this meeting for the rest of your life. This has been like a life-transforming meeting. So simple. It is not so much what the Buddha said, because you kind of knew that already, but more where it was coming from. It lends a certain authenticity to it. You believe it, not because of what he said, but how he said it. That is much more important. Yeah, you will have noticed that in your own life, that who says it matters enormously. It's not just about what is said, but who says it. Where it comes from is incredibly important. And so you walk away, and you walk away with these teachings in your heart. You know you're never going to forget these teachings for as long as you live. You go back, you sort out the problems with your husband or wife or your kids or whatever it is. Yeah, it is no longer an issue. You couldn't care less about it anymore. It's kind of easy to do. And then when the time is ready, you come back to these teachings again, because it has left a stamp in your mind that is almost indelible, that always you take with you. This is what happens with this very powerful meeting sometimes. And this is the reason why you keep coming back also to the Dhamma all the time. Why you don't give up, because you know deep down there's something very beautiful and powerful going on here. This is what the Buddha is about. So then you keep coming back, and gradually you start developing the path yourself. And eventually you too start to experience these fruits. And then you become that new teacher, who then carries on these teachings into the future. This is one way of thinking about the Buddha, of recalling the Buddha, of making these things your own, developing these qualities within. In the end, it's all about developing qualities inside. That is what matters, because that is what makes it all work. So let us have a look at the words here that we have just been reading out before. So far, I've just been talking here. So now let us have a look at the actual words. So you recollect the Buddha. The Blessed One is perfected. The Blessed One is an Arahant. Arahant is the word translated as perfected. And Arahant means like the worthy one, the worthy person, but perfected is a nice translation. I have used the same translation myself. So perfected here means a particular kind of perfection. It means perfection in a spiritual sense of the word. So he's an Arahant. He is a fully awakened Buddha, Samma Sambuddha. Similar kind of idea, the idea of awakening. Buddha means awakening, awakening to the truth, seeing reality as it actually is. Accomplished in knowledge and conduct, Vijja Charana Sampanno. And Vijja, knowledge here, is not any kind of knowledge. The Vijja here is the Te Vijja, the three knowledges. The Te Vijja, remembering your past life, understanding Kamma, and then understanding non-self, or becoming fully awakened. These are the Te Vijja. Ajahn Brahm translates Te Vijja not as knowledge, but as insight. And I think that is a very interesting translation, a very powerful way of translating this. Because knowledge is what you get at university, but insight is like an awakening. It's wisdom. It's the mind opening up to truth. That is what insight is about. And the many kinds of insight we often talk about in meditation. We talk about insight meditation and these kind of things. And those are very often not really they don't often take you all that far. They are kind of what you call small insights. But the real insights that actually work, that make a difference, are these large ones. Remembering your past life is one such real insight. And then, of course, understanding the laws of karma, understanding the mechanism that is behind the rebirth process. This is another kind of aspect of insight. This is the real insight that really matters. It may sound strange because we're used to thinking of inside, see impermanence, feelings arising and passing away, but often it doesn't really bite very, very much. This is what really bites and really has leaves a lasting impact. And finally, the idea of non-self at the very end of the path, the te vijja. And when you have these kind of insights, you become a different person. I was saying before that the idea that what the noble ones call happiness, ordinary people call suffering. What ordinary people call happiness, the noble ones call suffering. So it's like an inverse. And so when you see the way things are, you become a changed person. You're no longer capable of being the way you were before. Your conduct is changed. So when all the defilements are abandoned, well, you become naturally kind. You become naturally generous. You become naturally renunciant. A Buddha is someone who renounces, who doesn't hold on to anything in the world. And so that is what you should expect to see in someone who is awakened. These kind of qualities. They will have these qualities. And this matters because it means it is possible for us to judge to some extent who is worthy of respect and who is not, because they should have these kind of qualities that comes through and with the awakening experience. So I'll talk more about this later on. I want to talk about, when we come to the Sanghanusati, I want to talk about how to be able to judge who is the real Sangha. How do you know if someone is an Aryan, is a Sotapanna? How can we tell these things? And so then you can start to really judge for yourself. I'm not going to talk so much about it now because I think that's better to enable us to judge right now, in this world right now, who is worthy of respect. So knowledge and conduct, holy is sugato. It means the one, like someone who's gone to a good destination or something. Knower of the world. Knower of the world, it means that you understand the world in a new way. You understand, it doesn't just mean like the kind of usual way we think about knowing the world, knowing the various devalokas and these kind of things. It really means understanding happiness and suffering in the world, what is possible to achieve, how the world operates. Is a very important part of this. How the world kind of goes round and round, and you're not really going anywhere. How this idea of cyclical time, you kind of come back to where you started again and again and again. The little cycles in life, which is your habits always returning. The larger cycles of rebirth, and then the enormous cycles of universes, one following the other, and like moving on without really getting anywhere, roaming around in samsara. That's what understanding the world really refers to. I really like this idea of Buddhist time being circular, going around in cycles, and not being linear. Linear means you're going somewhere. We're not going anywhere. Except if you're on the spiritual path. If you are, then you're going somewhere. Only the spiritual path is linear in a certain sense. The rest of time is cyclical. So knower of the world, supreme guide for those who wish to train. We have just seen, I mentioned the idea of the Buddha being motivated by compassion and wisdom. We often talk about the Buddhas having these two qualities, compassion and wisdom. The wisdom is what enables the Buddha to give really good advice, and the compassion is the thing that motivates him to actually do it. Two beautiful qualities coming together. And this is what makes him the supreme, what does it say? The supreme guide for those who wish to train. Puddhisa Dhamma Sarati. Is Anuttara Puddhisa Dhamma Sarati is what this is in the Pali language. The supreme guide for those who wish to train. You are all here, so you wish to train. That's the good news. So you are on a good track, and you're on the right track, And the Buddha is the supreme guide. Are you sure it's the supreme guide? How come you got the supreme guide in your life? Isn't that amazing? How is that possible? You're born somewhere, you kind of go, there's so many wrong turns they can take. You can stay in Norway and just kind of worship Thor and Odin. or actually not so many people do that anymore. There are some crazy people do that, but or you can do whatever, all of these things, but somehow you find your way to the Buddha. Isn't that kind of extraordinary? Something about that which is kind of really amazing. It's already 4 o'clock. There's a really nice story in the Vinaya. I don't think I told you that story yet, which is about, did I tell the story about Anathapindika? No, I tell the story about Anathapindika, because it's a nice story, but not now. I'll come back. Maybe we can start. Shall we start at 7 o'clock today? It's a good idea. We'll start half an hour early. I'll tell the story of Anathapindika first of all, because otherwise we don't want to miss that story. And then we can finish off maybe this paragraph at the same time. But basically the idea here is to try, to understand more about the Buddha, to get the feeling that you are in the presence of something extraordinary here. It doesn't really matter what got you here. But the fact that you had the good fortune, the good karma, it's not really good fortune, the wisdom, whatever it is, to kind of come to this point, is just really extraordinary here. And sometimes we don't understand how fortunate we are. Because it is so difficult to come across these teachings. They are so rare in the world, they're so profound, that you start to understand how powerful it is and how important it is. It means you place more emphasis on these things in your life because you understand how extraordinary it is. And so this is the way then to help us to think about these things, to make the most out of it. Okay, so that is all for now. Let's just pay respect to the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, and then we'll see you back again this evening at 7 o'clock today. So new time, Freddie. Yeah. Okay.